Over the years, webtoons have skyrocketed into popularity since the last time I talked about how specific comics on webtoons have really displayed the fruits of their labors. Comics that were not really seen too much to the public eye have become full-blown anime such as God of High School, Tower God, and Nobulus. Now, it's irrelevant if you like these anime adaptations or not, because obviously the general public loves these series to the point Japanese studios and Crunchyroll decided to team up and make these series an anime reality. Because if I told myself these series were getting anime adaptations back in 2017, I would have been in utter shock. But as content online continues to spread across the digital landscape, one series in the mix of changing the formula of how to take webtoon series and stylize it to the point it puts a lot of Japanese manga and light novels to shame, I'm talking about the steadily acclaimed series Solo Leveling, a fantasy action webtoon following our main character Sung Jin-woo. And what I want to talk about today is how this webtoon is considered to me god tier storytelling. To start things off, Solo Leveling is a Korean manga written by Chung Young, art created by Jung Seung-young and Jang Sung-rak, and published by D&C Media. It is distributed in English by Webnovel and Tappy Tunes. The setting takes place in a reality similar to ours. However, mysterious objects known as gates start appearing, along with people across the planet undergoing a process known as awakening, in which they gain superhuman abilities. These people become hunters, forming organizations known as gates to traverse the dungeons which lie beyond the gate. Sung Ji-woo is the weakest hunter in this world and often undergoes a lot of self-torment. He perceives himself as worthless due to his status, but after a near-death experience in a failed dungeon raid, he experiences a reawakening, in which a hunter's powers either amplified or completely change. However, in a rare occurrence, Jin-woo only morphs into more of an anomaly when his power is aided by unknown force from where the secrets of the gates lie. His power is the ability to continuously get stronger or level up through this outside force referred to as the system. In the course of the story, we see the progression of Sung Ji-woo from a low E-class hunter to becoming the well-known Shadow Monarch. Now, before I go any deeper, clearly from what I just explained, this story is nothing new. We've seen power fantasies from time and time again where the protagonist starts weak or nothing to their name to becoming the character the reader wants to see. Main franchises such as My Hero Academia and Black Clover do the same power trope. Deku being the quirkless wimp to becoming the confident hero people can count on, and Ashita being a person with no magic to their name from anti-magic users within the acclaimed Magic Knights. Even in Korean comics where we see Bam from Tower God, a naive boy who stumbles within the tower, to now a full-fledged wave user able to beat opponents who are damn near godly to those within the tower. We basically see our heroes build their power from the ground up. So with that in mind, what does Solo Leveling do that sets it apart from those series? For starters, let's talk about the character Sung Jin-woo. In the beginning, Jin-woo originally saw things through a very simplistic moral compass, being the oldest sibling with a sister still in high school, a father who went missing prior before the series, and a mother who went into a coma known as the Eternal Sleep. Jin-woo needed to bear all these responsibilities in front of himself no matter the outcome, such as being slandered by his general peers for being the lowest ranking hunter ever. Of course, after his reawakening is where you start to see a shift in his personality. You see, due to the nature of his circumstances, requirements that need to be met by the system he got from one of the dungeons that nearly killed him, his psyche and mindset gradually changed over time into a more gritty but realistic doctrine. Now, of course, none of this is groundbreaking, but it's something the public wants right now, especially after the turmoil of 2020 that brought onto this world. It stands to reason why a character would suffer from similar turmoil, making them relatable. It's one of the reasons why Attack on Titan is so popular. Making a protagonist go through a traumatic event which shakes him to his core is something any human on this planet can easily understand. And through the course of the story, we see Jin-woo's mindset change from a black and white perception of the world to a gray nature of reality. Jin-woo goes through nearly impossible situations he must overcome is why this change occurs. Very early on the chapters actually, coming across a giant serpent with barely any weaponry, an onslaught of soldiers that look like they're something straight up Dark Souls, and not to mention if he doesn't complete a certain task, the system assigns him where he's set into a somewhat subgate where his penalty is a result of him being attacked by ferocious monsters in the shape of deadly centipedes. This also affects him mentally, going back to the soldiers in chapter 41, as Jinwoo has to fight them off with no end in sight. He is then suddenly greeted by his original self before the reawakening, somewhat representing his insecurities in a sense, giving lines of dialogue to self-doubt his situation, making that much harder for him to complete, which is something we can all relate. We as humans sometimes let our insecurities beat us before we really rise up to the challenge. But that's what makes Jinwoo such a great character, because after he gets out of his own mental block, which to most people who deal with depression or anxiety, getting out of your own head is a huge major step of growth, no matter the lifestyle. And to see Jinwoo get out of it to follow up by seeing the fruits of his labor shine with the video game aesthetics the system shows, by rewarding him every time he clears a gate, by gaining new items, weaponry, power level, and of course his signature skill, the shadow extraction. But before I go into detail about that, we first need to talk about the art style, because it plays an important role in what I think is the true turning point for the series and for Jinwoo's character. To pull back for a second, Solo Leveling's art is best described as sleek. It's full colored and the action is well drawn, and this works because Solo Leveling has some crazy fast paced fight scenes. My favorite actually is in chapter 38 when Jinwoo fights Igris. Each panel shows what it means to have a true underdog fight, with Jinwoo trying his best to keep up against Idris' overwhelming strength, and Jinwoo trying to desperately get an edge over the knight. This is where the true turning point of the series and the art shines at its best. You see, after Jinwoo gains the shadow extraction skill and defeats Igris, he then follows up with resurrecting the fallen knight, as well as the other knights in the dungeon. The shadow designs are simple, yet they give more life ironically before they were alive, and as Jinwoo levels up, so too does his variety of shadow generals, each having their own unique design and personality. Yeah, the shadows aren't just mindless drone-like fighters. Some retain their personality once they're defeated and brought back as shadows, with Igris being chivalrous and loyal, Iron being somewhat of the Thunderhead comic relief, and my all-time favorite Biru, who acts like the loyal Alfred-like character, as he's currently the only shadow at the time of me making this video who can speak due to his resurrection being so high leveled. The shadows, I believe, are the true meat of the story because they give a sense of foreshadowing for what's to come ahead and mystery, and I believe with the art giving the shadows such life with bold designs and comedic expressions really excelled their appeal to the reader. I mean, even Jinwoo has a captivating look, where the artist shows the S-rank hunter being, well, a hunter, where his eyes glow in these stunning visual light trails as he weaves past his opponents, showing how Jinwoo is more than an opponent, but rather a force in nature to be reckoned with. Now, I haven't talked about the other characters because the story is mainly focused on Jinwoo and his shadows. This is really the downside to Solo Leveling because they don't make such a huge impact on the story besides maybe a few. A good example of this would be the character Hyung Dong-soo. He was an S-rank hunter that wanted revenge for Jinwoo after killing his older brother in a raiding party incident. At first, he seems like a vicious person, like the story was gearing him up to fight Jinwoo at some point and become somewhat of an obstacle for Jinwoo, but instead we see Dong-soo get his ass whooped by Jinwoo's father, who supposedly returns, and later on when Dong-soo returns to Korea, he still doesn't get his face off with Jinwoo on the count of Jinwoo being stuck in a red gate at the time of Dong-soo's arrival. I feel like at this point, if they bring Dong-soo back, I couldn't see him putting up any good fight against Jinwoo, because by the time we get to season 2, Jinwoo is literally a force of nature at this point. Overall, it's because of Jinwoo being so overwhelmingly powerful that he somewhat overshadows the other characters. I mean, no pun intended. I mean, the majority of the cast really serves as a foil to Jinwoo's character growth. The only characters I can say show any impact on the story is maybe Jinwoo's father, who is still a mystery by the way, but will most likely play a huge role in the series, the national rank hunter Thomas Andre, who has a real interest in our lead protagonist, and maybe young Jinhoo, who I've seen had so much character development midway through season 1 and majority of season 2, which leads to my final point, which is growth. Midway through chapter 139, Jin-ho gets a call from his mother, alerting him to come back from Japan. Jin-ho informs Jin-woo that he needs to leave before him, yet Jin-woo responds in a short manner because, as the reader, we know why Jin-woo acts like this because he knows why Jin-ho has to leave. You see, before the raid towards Japan, Jin-woo was contacted by Ji-ho's father because he was getting early symptoms of internal sleep like Jin-woo's mother. Now, Jin-woo's mother woke up from her sleep on account of Jin-woo finding a magical elixir that brought her back from one of the dungeons he solo raided. Ji-ho's father caught wind of this news and quickly asked Jin-woo for help. Yet, Jin-woo refused and did not offer his help only because he simply didn't trust him, and you can't blame him. Jin-woo only has so few of the elixirs left, so he has to be careful when and where he uses it. Yet, there's too many eyes on Jin-woo for him to let his guard down, even for a second. But this act of choice wasn't my point of growth. To fast forward after Ji-ho returns back to Korea, where he finds his father now in complete internal sleep. Of course, it only makes the scene much more heartbreaking when Ji-ho finds out his father has been watching his success since he founded the Hajin Guild with Jin-woo, with hundreds of newspaper clippings and a scrapbook, the same hobby Ji-ho has been doing since the start of the series. You would think towards the end this was how the chapter was going to end, but it doesn't. Instead, Jin-woo shows up without anyone noticing and gives the holy elixir to Ji-ho's father, at which chapter 139 ends with Jin-woo saying at the end, "It's a bit early, but happy birthday, Jin-ho." This right here is the growth I was talking about. Jin-woo has been through a lot since the beginning of season 1, and I don't blame him for some of the hard and somewhat cruel choices he made. You would think as he gets stronger he would become colder and more logical, which he has for sure, but that newfound revelation did not consume him. At the end of the day, he is still the same Jin-woo from the beginning of the series, just more mature, and you see that in this chapter. Knowing a way to do right by your choices but not having to receive recognition really hit me personally, and this is what makes Solo Leveling stand out among the emerging webtoons. It's not just its sleek art and fast-paced action, but also its primary narrative that it chants the viewer, wrapping the audience into the setting with Jin-woo and this chaotic world he himself has been a product of, and I truly believe that's what makes Jin-woo's character so relatable to me. As I stated before, guys, on my channel, at the start of 2020, things hit me like a freaking sledgehammer. It was like I had this sandcastle that I took hours to build, only for it to be crumbled by a humongous wave. Solo Leveling helped me deal with that sense of dread and helped me understand it. So when I say read Solo Leveling, it's not just because of the immersive narrative or adrenaline-packed action sequences and very modern but satisfying art, but rather what it means to be human and what it means to carry the weight of what it means to be human in a chaotic world that is life. And that's why I think Solo Leveling is god-tier storytelling. Well guys, that's going to do it for this video, at which I like to say I'm so glad I was able to talk about this series. A lot of people wanted me to talk about Solo Leveling for a minute, and I was glad I was able to freely express my love for this series. This series has gained a lot of traction lately to the point Japan is actually getting a light novel version of the series, so we'll see if it eventually gets its own anime in the near future. Also, as a side note, be sure to comment on the bottom of the video what you guys think is going to be the climax of the series. Personally, I think Jin-woo might revert back to an E-rank hunter since it was somewhat hinted at season 2, but that's mainly a theory, so take what I say with a grain of salt. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Borg, who designed the thumbnail for this. He really came in at a good time to design the art, so check out his work when you can. His social media accounts are down below in the description box. Overall though, I have more videos coming, hopefully soon, so until then, be sure to subscribe to my channel. If you want, keep track of the current status of my work. You can check me out on my Twitter or on my Instagram. Until then guys, keep staying excellent, and I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye.